Welcome to The Wanderer's Compass, a Big Blend radio travel podcast featuring Joelle Machia and Ryan Slough. So welcome, everyone. Last month with the Wanderer's Compass travel podcast here with Joelle Machia and Ryan Slough, we talked about Susquehanna River Valley in Pennsylvania. So first, I'm going to go to Joelle. Joelle, did I pronounce this yet?
You actually got it dead right this time.
Okay. It's so funny. Like, I finally got this. But before we even got into the destination, and you can listen in the past episodes there, we talked a lot about sustainability and tourism to the point of we were like, we better do this as part two on the podcast. Because that is really something that Ryan and Joelle are just really big advocates of, is responsible and sustainable tourism. And part of that comes from also that Joelle spoke at the UN meeting this year. And so we're going to continue this conversation and take a look at what is global responsible tourism and what can we do as travelers and what can destinations do. We've got so much to cover. But first, welcome back. And Joelle, excuse me. It was exciting to have you be a spokesperson for the travel and tourism industry.
Yeah, it was, let's say at the least, thank you, Lisa, it truly was an honor. I mean, I was shocked to be invited to begin with. I was like, really? But it has been a platform for quite a while that we need to be responsible guests and visitors, no matter where we go in the world, and that we need to be cognizant of where we are, what we need to be looking for, sensitive to culture, to the people, to their traditions, everything. And it's something we've sort of spoken about quite a bit, especially on social media, but also on the blog. And so this is how they sort of found us, because they were like, well, we like your platform, we'd like you to talk. And the event I was invited to speak at was a side event to the General Assembly. So this is the 80th year of the United Nations, and this was what they call GA80, so standing for General Assembly 80th year. And this was when all the world leaders show up, and it's a week long of all these speakers and so forth. It's the only time of year the whole planet shows up in the sense of heads of state and so forth. The UN is open every day and is always doing business, but this is like the big session. So I was at a side event, or we were at a side event that was occurring at the exact day of the first day of the General Assembly, which was September 23rd. And it was funny. We didn't realize, so really just a couple of days before then, my sister said, hey, did you know that the president is going to be there tomorrow? And I was like, what? Because we were going to be there tomorrow. And so it was literally occurring at the same time as the General Assembly that obviously always makes a lot of news. And so the side event, though, is a very important permanent mission for the United Nations on water and sanitation for Africa and really beyond. And it's the science-based solutions. It's called the Science-Based Solutions for a Pact for the Sustainable Development Goals. And the whole idea is, as we learn, and we can talk about this a little bit more as we speak here, water and sanitation is core to anything. Without water, we don't survive. Human beings have to have water. And as the day progressed, I was just one of many speakers. I just had a few minutes, but we had an 8-hour day of listening to incredibly impassioned, brilliant people from all over the world share the importance of this and where they're going and the science-based solutions they've come up with to finally actually enact them. And it's pretty interesting because it's like lessons and stories they were telling us from different people from different parts of Africa as well as the Caribbean. In Africa, there'll be children who will walk 8 kilometers just to get some water for the day and then walk back 8 kilometers. And this is their day every day. And this is just a matter of survival. Those children will not be going to school because survival is the only thing they're focused on. With water brings them a whole different life chance for education, a chance for integrity, for growth, for actually making a difference. But when they're basically only surviving, and it was interesting here, the different solutions. It depends where you are in the world. Some of them, all you need to put a couple of solar panels in a well dug in the middle of a town. And all of a sudden, you bring water to people right there without having to do this massive infrastructure. So it was a lot of speaking about things like that. So it was really a privilege to speak. I was one of the speakers in the morning, and the reason we spoke about it, they wanted me to speak about sustainable travel because water also has a major role in travel and has been issues in places like Venice and other parts of the world. So it was just to talk about the importance of engaging people. And in sustainable travel, one of the things you see a lot happening is that we don't engage the voices of the people in those communities that are impacted by tourism and impacted by these issues. And if we don't engage them, we're not being responsible to them, and we're also causing problems, which we're seeing in various parts of the world. So it really fit in more than I thought. At first, I thought I realized it would. It really did fit, and then we got to speak to some of these heads of state and world leaders, and it was fascinating to see that they were engaged. They were interested in that. It was like, yeah, we need to sort of focus on that too, because if we engage the community, everything's going to go much smoother, and keep them informed and educated makes a big difference. So it was a very amazing experience, I think, and Ryan can speak to what it was like. I mean, I was nervous up there. I don't know if, I still haven't looked at the video of my talk, but Ryan was right there. I was able to bring a guest, and of course I would bring Ryan because it was our blog that got this whole thing to even start. But it was an incredible day. We walked out of there so empowered, so excited, so energized at the path these people are taking and the passion and the sacrifices they make to get there.
I want to see that video. Nancy and I did get the opportunity to watch some of the different speakers, and it is empowering. And what I saw, and I think I mentioned that on our last episode, was that, it just seemed to be very much about working together as communities globally, right? And I think that's just such an important thing. So Ryan is here, of course. And Ryan, I believe that you've actually been doing some, research and studying sustainable tourism, especially even on water. So welcome back. How are you doing?
How you doing? I'm pretty good.
Good. Now listen, we do need our water for whiskey, right? That's important. And for beer.
Still.
Yes.
Filtered.
Distilled. Yes. Filtered, distilled, and clean. So listen, we do not need to wash our towels inside a hotel room. If you're there for 3 days, you don't need like 10 towels. So leave that for whiskey and beer. I'm just kidding. Ryan, tell us a little bit about what you have been doing on the studying side of this, and then tell us a little bit of what you saw of being there and your experience and seeing, Joelle up there. Did you wave at her and make her laugh? I know you're a good partner in travel and support though.
I was like 8 feet away, so I didn't want to distract. Yes, well, so it came out. I thought, as you know, I'm in school full time right now, and my last semester, my last class that just ended a few weeks ago, was an advanced writing class, and for the final project, basically throughout the class, it was just basically you're doing one step of a paper, and then you change it to a different type of paper, and then you expand on it, and you make these larger and larger papers until final project. That was right when that was starting, was right about when she started talking about this sustainable tourism and the water and sanitation thing that for the UN. And so then she brought up with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN talks about. So I was trying to, thinking about doing something on like tourism, since I'm like, well, I know some stuff about tourism since this kind of thing I do, but I didn't know what. But we know that there's always issues with, sustainability, people, being destructive of the environment or, so forth, pollution and all that. And then, so I started doing my paper on that pretty much. And then when she mentioned all that, she was like, well, maybe you could put this in there to be like a good, review of what's we're doing or she's going to be doing and everything else before. So I was like, okay. So I looked at it and then I was like, okay. So then I just started pairing up things of the different goals of what, learning about them and what applies and how to tourism and sustainability to, better the industry and, things like not just like water and sanitation, being responsible in like your consumption of things, pollution, equality for everyone, because there's a lot of issues where, you go in certain countries that, it's like, oh, it's a beautiful resort. Everything looks nice and fancy. But as soon as you step off the resort, you're in like some of the worst living conditions, it seems like. around. And those are the people that are working at this nice resort. So that's one of the goals is to create equality, and to take this industry and other things and, give back to the people that are putting into it rather than just, the corporations, like give back to the community, the people working it. So, the whole town as a whole can be sustained and have a good quality of life rather than just, the resorts or the people that own the resorts. Yeah, it was pretty interesting to go on, and to look into that and kind of add a little new thing of knowledge and perspective on what we already kind of try to practice a little bit, like you said with the towel thing. Like I mean, if I'm staying in some place, I don't need my towel washed every day, and that's why a lot of these hotels, and even in the States, they have that, like, hey, hang your towel up if you're not, if you're going to reuse it, because again, with the water consumption, that's like one of the biggest issues around the world. I mean, especially when you got island nations, you got places like Santorini, and then you got, Venice and other places like that. People don't think about it. It's like, oh, it's just washing a towel. I'm like, yeah, you're washing a towel. And so are the 200 other people in that room or in that hotel. And so are the other 300 people in the hotel next door. And then that just compounds and compounds. And, next thing you know, you got, lakes and stuff that are starting to, or reservoirs that are drying up, or extra pollution that's getting pumped into the water because how much extra chemicals and everything else that their infrastructure can't sustain.
Yeah.
So so it was a nice kind of a tie-in. It was how it just kind of lined up. It was like, oh, okay, and we kind of put it together. So
that actually helped me a lot. It helped me a lot because I was, I was hearing about SDGs when they said, well, this is, what this whole, this water mission thing is. And I was like, okay, but I had never really heard about SDGs. And then Ryan started doing this paper. And in the process, what he was learning incredibly enhanced my understanding of what I was dealing with, and then the people we would be meeting focus on, because we kept hearing SDG, and SDGs, if not knowing, is basically stands for the United Nations. It stands for Sustainable Development Goals, and there's 17 of these goals, and everything is tied to these 17 goals. It's about making the world a more equitable and sustainable place by the year 2030. We're actually got 5 more years of this to go. And tourism touches about, what was it, Ryan? We decided 6 of them, 6, 10, 11, 12, 15, and 17. Yeah, a lot of them. So it was actually incredible that Ryan chose to do this paper because it enhanced my understanding. And I think I walked into that room so much more confident. But we both were, because then we could have these conversations. We understood what they were talking about, and we really understood the mission. And I think that was the most important of this, is understanding the mission. So his paper was huge. He landed doing well, and he actually got an A in the class. So clearly it was barely, but
well done.
Skimmed by. So I still have my 4.0. It was
right
rough.
on.
It was rough.
It is some technical stuff too to understand. And I think that sometimes with sustainability, and we start talking about waterways and the science behind it all, I think that is actually one of the things that's making it hard for people to grasp onto what's happening with climate change, because it's a little science, and we're going, why are we getting snowstorms here when it's supposed to be we're heating up? And then the politics get into it. So I have a couple questions here. I wanted to ask Ryan, in your research, when you talked about waterways, and I've got some answers that are more positive, but I've never heard, did it touch on any of your research on what is going on in cruise ships? Because of when we talk about water and travel, I know we're talking about drinking water and water systems around the world and how we utilize water. But I also wonder about cruise ships, for either of you on that, because I think they are trying really hard because when you get those really big ones, that is like a floating city. And then there's smaller ones like the little barges that are actually renovating historic barges into something you can float down, and it seems more sustainable. So it's kind of, there's the gamut, right? And there's like river cruises, we all know the brand names, and I'm not trying to point fingers at all on any of them, because I think they really are trying. And so, Ryan, did any of your research stumble on that, on cruise ships?
No, I didn't really cover on that because, I had a certain length of the paper. Actually, my first draft I turned in, she's like, "This is way too long." I'm like, "Oh, well, I thought, when is that ever a bad thing?" Like, usually is, so I had to trim down because I find like these different research articles on different things, and some of it was like, finding stuff on, like how they've incorporated green spaces into their, cities to help with equality and quality of life for like people and the communities, and then like the water, like I said, for the water conservation and things. So I didn't really touch on that, but I do know that a lot of places now are dealing with these cruise ships in different ways because they just, throw these mass people into cities like Venice being the most, probably the well-known, that and Santorini, where they have these very limited water resources and infrastructure to handle, X amount of thousands of people within an instant. A lot of these, they said the infrastructure can't handle that, but also it goes into the other stuff, like I said, with the equality and things like that, because people, they'll come in there and they'll like, okay, they go to dinner or whatever this else, and then they roll out, and then the place, everything's just trashed, it seems like, and then no one stayed to like see the shops, and then no one's really into towns, other tourists or locals, because they don't want to be there when thousands of people just come in and flood the place. So like no one's going into the shops, so it's like hurting some people but helping others. But then those like restaurants and other things get overwhelmed. So yeah, didn't quite talk about that, but I mean, I know Joelle probably knows about the same amount of stuff as that with the cruise ships.
Cruise ships are concerning, and Venice is handling pretty well now, because I was in Venice years ago during the cruise ship season at the peak, and it was horrible, especially in the main squares. It was just, you could barely walk through. Venice has taken control of that, and it's now, when I was in Venice in May with my husband and some family, it was a whole different place. There were still people. We were there actually during a major event, but it was nothing compared to the cruise ship days. And one thing I think Venice learned also during COVID is they've definitely have some significant water issues, especially water contamination issues. But those issues virtually went away during COVID. So clearly the impact of all this tourism has a negative effect on that community. So I think that was one of the factors that probably affected this now very strict limitations of cruise ships coming into Venice. A lot of them are being actually diverted to Trieste, Italy, which we have been to a couple times as well, and which isn't as pretty for Trieste, but it definitely brings them some business. But you can still get to Venice on like a 2-hour bus trip. So it gets, people can still go, but less people are going, not thousands at a second are coming to do that. So Venice is handling it well. Santorini needs to do something, because I've been to Santorini when there were no cruise ships, and I've been there with cruise ships, and it's unbelievable the difference when there's cruise ships in port. A lot of them, thousands of people in these tiny streets. And a lot of these people actually don't eat dinner. They don't stay and eat locally. They buy a couple of trinkets and move on. So it's not benefiting, and causing an incredible stress for the residents. I mean, it's just like their communities are lost. And in the process, a lot of their culture and traditions get lost in the process. And Santorini is making plans, but there's a lot of money involved. And so we hear it's still not receptive. But something has to be done, because these cruise ships do cause some major issues, and it brings money, but from a point of a local lifestyle and perspective and actually helping businesses, not so much.
That's interesting. Yeah, because people aren't going to carry everything in their suitcase, and, they can ship things. That's a good thing for shopping, but I wanted to just touch on that. And the other thing is, I wanted to touch on the UN, because there's two things. This is the two-part question thing. See, I remembered. One is this tends to get political in regards to sustainability. But from all the interviews, and I've done, I'm going to say in the thousands by now, because we're getting ancient here on Big Blend Radio. Next year is 19 years of podcasts, and we probably air anywhere from 1 to 3 podcasts a day. Okay. So there's a lot of interviews going on, and I know this show today will be out on our Nature Connection show, which deals with nature, wildlife, and the environment. So we've done a lot of expert interviews on sustainability and the environment, and often it gets political. And then the UN, that's part two, is also political in some ways. But from what I saw of the UN Assembly this year, 2025, this, spreading good news of unity and working together to do something. Talking about cruise ships and water, we look at the islands being the most impacted. Carlisle Richardson, who was a representative for the UN, was on our show a number of times over the years. He's based in Australia doing that now. And his whole thing was, we've got to take care of the islands. And you hear the islands really doing a good job because they know that they're going to be severely impacted and already are. Alaska's already had, little places having to be, evacuated, etc. So we know that is a big deal. And they are actually, I think the island's doing a really good job from what I've read and listened to and watched. They're really trying hard, but they're trying to wake up the sleeping giants of the countries around the world. So the UN gets knocked about a lot. But I wanted to go to you, Joelle, on that because of the politics of it all. The reality is sustainability, it's about saving something. So like a penny saved is a penny earned, right? Benjamin Franklin coined that, term. And it's really the truth. So when we save something, we gain something. And that is what sustainability is. A business needs to be sustainable. And so, capitalism is also about sustainability, but it doesn't mean you can be capitalistic, entrepreneur, all of those good things that we are as a country very ambitious in that way, does not mean that you do it through taking something else out. We should be adding to and providing along the way. So politics has gotten in the way, I believe, in climate change. So Joelle, for you, I wanted to see, did you hear anything or learn anything that you can share with us on, can we move forward beyond politics maybe, and maybe these kinds of gatherings are exactly what needs to happen to move forward regardless of politics and just ignore the
Yes, and I think that was one thing I was a bit of a surprise. So I think let's define sustainable tourism for people who sort of unsure what that means. Sustainable tourism means meeting today's travel needs without compromising the ability of future generations to enjoy the same experiences. It's about balance. So we ensure the travel benefits local communities, preserves cultural heritage, and protects the environment. Look at it as a total picture because you can't really break that down into different pieces. And I think that's a really important part of all this. And the United Nations clearly has its critics, and deservedly so. But what is the goal? The goal of the United Nations is to promote peace, security, human rights, and development through international cooperation. The problem is sometimes symbolism conflicts with substance. Power imbalances obviously occur enormously in the United Nations, limited enforcement power. And so there's obviously, but then there's also the good things like peacekeeping, conflict resolution, humanitarian aid, which a lot of this water stuff and equality in these communities, especially affected by tourism and issues, is part of the good things. The health leadership, the sustainable development is all the good things of the United Nations. And I think you see the larger scale of the conflicts and, this one says we don't need it in this country. But I think when you see these smaller projects like the one we saw, the WSA, the Permanent Observer Mission of Water and Sanitation, you're taking away a lot of the political part of it. And I think that's what gave us hope as we saw this, was that, we don't need the top countries to approve us putting wells in these small communities and areas desperate for water. We don't need necessarily those people to worry about the sanitation. It's more of a goal of the United Nations. And so maybe if we don't look at it on the big scale, but we're looking at the individual incredible work they're doing throughout the world and teaching each other and helping each other, to see all these African nations at that event we were at, and the Caribbean nations too, because they have serious water issues there as well, talking and sharing and working together to find an answer for each other. And what one country has, like in one place, their issues there just don't have water. So they're looking at ways to take seawater and using that, making it fresh water. Where other parts is digging a well. Other ones is cleaning up existing waterways. Whatever the case may be, you realize that is the true heart of what the United Nations seems to be, working sort of toward the promotion of peace and to share humanity. And while we focus on humanity, we take care of these individual things. And in the process, by providing safe and clean water, which is core to survival, we bring so much more to these people's lives. Having heard all sides of this going in there, it was not what I think, and Ryan can maybe attest to this too or not, we were surprised at the connection, especially for countries that are actually known to be fighting each other in Africa, was like, we need to work together. We need to work for peace. We need to focus on love and focus on the people and the communities. And it was really hopeful. I mean, it really was a really positive thing to be part of. And to see that energy, and it's contagious, and it makes you excited because people do care and there is stuff happening. We may not hear about the news. We more hear about the bigger stuff that isn't happening or the conflicts. There's a lot of really amazing smaller stuff happening, and that small stuff can lead to big stuff.
I agree. And I think sometimes we get caught up in like the political stuff and all that drama instead of just getting to it, just getting busy. And at the same time, people are stressed out about it too.
But there are people getting busy. There are people there.
Exactly. So join
We're just not hearing about it as much.
Yes. And I think it's, people poo-poo the grassroots. Don't ever poo-poo the grassroots unless you're going to provide fertilizer for the roots, right? And that's the truth. Grassroots does make a difference. Communication makes a difference. And I think that's something that what you both do as travel writers and with your blog, The Wanderer's Compass, everybody go to wandererscompass.com, always linked in the episode notes. You're making a difference. You make a difference even when you do Warrior Wednesdays, right? Showing, hey, this is, some history we want to preserve. I mean, I think the UN has done one of the best things is preserving history. And part of preserving history means we're not taking away. I think, Ryan, we talked about the imploding buildings last podcast, right? It's like, what do we have that we can build on and keep nurturing to do well, right? Isn't that part of it? So, yeah, what do you think of this part of the conversation, Ryan, especially from the research you've done as a traveler, travel writer, photographer? Because actually, I think photographers, as we go out there, we see things that we don't, sometimes you get home and you look at things and go, oh, I didn't see that piece of trash over there. We start to see things. I mean, I'm finding it very hard to photograph places without trash in the photos these days or pollution. And that includes sound. I have this whole goal of recording parks around the country. And I'm depressed because even just on a cell phone, you hear airplanes, you hear things that, you're supposed to be in a piece of quiet, so all of, sound, water, air, the land, all of this goes to it. But yeah. And then also going to the UN, Ryan, what do you have to say on this part of it?
Yeah. Well, it was a pretty interesting experience. And just be able to meet all these people, and it's like, it felt odd because I'm like, why are we here? We're travel writers. We got heads of state type, all these like fancy people and calling them, Your Excellency and all this other stuff. And, all these people were like, a lot of them were doctors and so forth. But it made sense because, I said applying tourism is a huge industry and it affects a lot of places and especially on these isolated, very these tourist locations that people love to go to, but they're very isolated and have limited resources. Being that the UN, it wasn't anything political. Everyone was there for one goal. They didn't say like, well, hey, your government needs to do this, or hey, our government needs to step up, or you just got
Yeah, there was none of that. You're right. I didn't think about that.
No one ever. There was no ever mention of money or anyone's government or who's in charge or whatever. It was all about let's work together and fix this. And every person that came up and spoke had their own vision of something where they know, hey, they can incorporate this or add this, or this is what's working in other places. Can they scale that up or down to meet this location or whatever? So that was nice that there wasn't any kind of politics or anything really involved in that. It was just a straightforward, like, let's fix this. And that main issue was the clean water and sanitation, SDG 6, because I said that's like the building block of everything. You have clean water, you have life, you have access to water, you can have sanitation, and with that builds industry. You can build, you can
Mm,
cook, you can clean, and then now your hospitals are better because you have clean water. People can go to school and learn rather than go out and get water, and then it just builds up and it builds up, and then eventually it'll spread out. And
mm,
it all begins with that one, and because you can't sustain all these other things if it's not there, and it starts
mm,
with the water. And then when you have all that and you can have somewhere you can base a town or place to live off of, and people can come and be able to visit and sustain themselves as well with water and everything like that, then, a lot of these industries like with tourism, these inequalities can start shrinking, and then
mm,
quality of life can start growing. Being a traveler, yeah, you see like all these, I always notice these things. I'm like, why is this here and there? And that's trash or whatever. And I know a lot of it, yeah, a lot of it's just the locals or whatever, it is what it is. But a lot of it is due to the tourists, and it's the mindset. I think all of us as a society, not just, United States, but everywhere is people need to realize what they're doing. Every little thing they do impacts something,
mhm.
and, it's like a trickle effect, if we all work together, just do our little parts. Like I hang up my towels. I don't, I try as much as possible. Like, all right, they don't need to wash that. I can do it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can have it another day. But making
Yeah.
sure I put the recycle in recycling, and then pick up a piece of trash if I see some. My boy does it all the time around here. He's like, well, someone left this, and we'll walk and pick up at the park and pick up some trash and throw it away. And like I never tell him to do that, but he sees it because he knows better. He knows it's wrong. So everyone
Mm.
just has to do their part, I think.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to that. If everybody just did one thing, how much are we going to change? Just one thing,
Yeah.
all of us. Do one thing that we can commit to, hopefully be consistent on, right? I think commitment and consistency is part of that. And I love that, and your son doing that, it's, getting the next generation involved. I worry about our kids looking at what is the future of climate change and the fear they have. And yet, really, again, I always look at fear, and I think a lot of politics comes from that and greed, of course. But fear, the only way to get through fear is to go through it. And the only way to go through it is to actually get involved. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the meetings, and then also these SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, is there something to think of? Okay, what can I do? Instead of feeling helpless, because a lot of people do, if you turn on the news, you don't know who to believe. But when you start seeing trash in your park, well, I can do that. I can pick that up. There's so many simple little things we can do. Do I need pesticides in my yard? Does the hotel need to use pesticides? There's great programs, in tourism too. Like there's the certified backyard wildlife habitats that people can do, like through the National Wildlife Federation. A lot of the bed and breakfasts that Nancy and I love to go to bed and breakfast. Why? It supports a small business. Now that's sustainability. That goes into capitalism as well. So that takes away that little political stuff. You're helping. And a lot of times these bed and breakfasts, it's someone's home. Sure. It's often a historic Victorian home or something along those lines. Maybe it's a farm, but it's actually those people that you're supporting as a small business. You're there, and what they're doing is saving history, saving nature.
Yeah.
There's always something tied to that. During COVID, bed and breakfasts were the place to go, and also those old historic motels that people stopped going, and now they're back in trending. Road tripping is up. Every year since COVID, it's been going up 6+%. Route 66 has its 100th anniversary next year. The Jefferson Highway is celebrating 110 years of being a historic highway next month in November. November, that's our month now. So it's road tripping has been part of it, but how do you do it? It's do we do it with get the whole family in there, get friends and family in one car, instead of 10. It's just a very interesting thing as we go. But bed and breakfast during COVID, no one, and even hotels, were not going in and doing housekeeping out of sanitation for everybody and being safe. And a lot of people moved on and realized from that, just like we all learned how to do Zoom, we all learned, hey, we can actually use the same towel every day.
Mhm.
We learned those things. And so we can move forward on that. You mentioned, Ryan, inequalities. And I think that is also a very big thing to talk about. Travel is one of the most important industries in the world. The only thing that affects travel is war and then things like COVID. But it is one of the most important things in industries in the world, one of the most consistent industries in the world. And so when we talk about sustainability, we do need to be sustainable in the tourism industry. It is a important part of it. And part of travel lets us see some of the things we don't want to see in the world. Like when you said, Ryan, about us stepping outside the resort, then you're like, oh, okay, now what's going on, right? So when tourism is done correctly and tourism is done with the community being part of a tourism makeup in a town, then we start to see things like trash go away. The quality of life for a community will improve and jump up because they know tourism equals dollars into the community, and that tourism dollar will affect every single person within that community. It affects the education system, and it makes cleaner parks. It means, hey, you have a bathroom downtown that you can go to. It means, hey, your downtown starts to be spruced up. Maybe you get murals. Things like that. But tourism does bring quality of life. So that also means we start to understand different cultures, and that means inequalities start to get seen and dealt with. So I wanted to go to Joelle on that because inequalities often mean women. So let's go there.
Okay, so that's very true. You were actually, to give you an actual number on the economic impact of travel throughout the world, 1 out of 10 jobs in the world is travel related. This is huge. And so to say, well, we just need to get rid of visitors or travelers, that's not true, because in some countries and communities, it is their lead economic driver. So to deny that this is important is also a sort of putting a blinder on, because it is needed. So these places saying, oh, we just want to get rid of all tourists, that's not reasonable either, because that is such an important part of the economy. Women tend to get sometimes lost in this. And actually, in my first day of the United Nations, I went to what they called a First Ladies Day, which was basically the whole message of that day was the importance of having women at the table, speaking for women, and spreading peace and love, because without women at the table, we're not as likely to get in that direction. And also in doing that is actually engaging these women in these communities so they aren't lost in the shuffle, that they do have voices. And that was a big message in all of this, is making sure that everyone in the community has voices, not just the rich, not just the power people in the community, but the locals, the people who live there, because we see so many of these cultures lost, and which has always been our mantra when we travel, where we enter someone else's home, the home being whether their physical home or their country or their community. We are now part of their culture, traditions, and daily life. If we're not respectful of that, then we not only lose the ability to learn for ourselves, we then hurt them in the process. They feel like they don't matter. And in a lot of those cases, you're interacting with is these women. Women need to be at the table here talking about it. They need to be engaged. It's a great way to bring, again, jobs to the community who might be, again, very low pay, but then you can have these women work at these various aspects along the line of tourism. And there is, if you go, as we even travel in the United States throughout the world, a lot of the people we meet are women. These people we meet at hotels, we meet at communities, we see at these castles we go to, we tour these small towns. A lot of these, who's the front face of this is women. And I think women have a huge voice to really make this sustainable tourism laugh. Because if you start talking to them, they truly understand it, I think, more so than most people. They sort of understand also cultural empathy and so forth. So I think we definitely need to get more women at the table at this. And they are there. I think we just need even more so, because the inequality, especially in certain areas of the world, is a big issue. But I see it changing. And that was one of the things I saw, that when the various countries talked about that day, the First Ladies Day, it was all about getting more and more women involved in local government and having a voice, putting them at the table. And when we hear their voices and then follow through, we can resolve so many inequalities out there in the world.
I love that. I think it's so important. It really is. And women have ruled the world forever. They should be seen and heard, not like children should not be seen or heard. I'm just kidding. I am just absolutely kidding. It really is, when you think about it, that we've all got to have a voice in this. And so the playing field has to change. And inequalities to me also goes to financial equality. So in tourism, we also have to look at what we're doing to the actual city makeup, the community makeup. Who gets the parks? Who gets the trees? We've worked with American Forests to have a tree equity program. And you can go, I think it's what's your tree equity? Type in American Forest tree equity. You can put in your zip code and even nail it down on this map to your house to see what your tree equity is. Because if we all had the right number of trees, we could actually mitigate climate change. And, it's really amazing. However, if you go into a neighborhood and those who do not have the money, somehow the poorer neighborhood doesn't get the park, doesn't get the trees. So it's very interesting about our makeup. So I wanted to go, just going from the inequalities, it also ties into sustainable cities and communities, because if we can work on inequalities, I think we're going to be working on making more sustainable communities. What do you think, Ryan? Isn't that one of the goals?
Yeah, I mean, and one of the big parts of that is, especially with these larger companies and organizations that have the money to do these things, they need to start finding out, or not finding out, but taking into consideration of the stakeholders in it, everything that they do. It's not just their business putting this thing there. It's the people that live in that community. It's the small shopkeepers. It's whoever. And so they need to, what's one of the things is how you're trying to come together, partnerships and other things, whether it be country helping out another country or organizations or, companies working together and finding these, who has the most at stake in this. And it's not just the person investing the money. It's, let's talk to the community. Do they even want this here? Because if it's like, oh, cool, that's, because a lot of the problem is, a corporation will build something because they're going to build it and they don't care that it's going to shut down all these little stores, but now there's a lot of, there's a lot of collaboration and trying to bring the people in the community into these things, to where okay, maybe we're not going to build this business, but maybe they'll build this nice park and infrastructure here. And then now that company gets X amount of profit from these stores, but all these stores can now open up there and all these people can, have their park and their community and maintain that authenticity of the culture in the town or whatever, but without compromising on or financially. And so yeah, there's a lot of things that needs to come into account when with all the infrastructure and all these different projects that people do. So.
And as travelers too, we need to be mindful of who and what, right? Where. And when we're booking trips, right? So
Yeah.
I know one of the SDGs is responsible consumption and production. So as travelers, we are responsible. We have to be responsible for who we partner up with. I have a travel writer friend the other day who rode an elephant, right, as part of a tour. And she said, I'm putting this here and I would never do this today. But years ago, it just didn't dawn on me on how bad this was for the wildlife, for the environment, for the whole makeup. And even TripAdvisor has gotten to a point now of not, promoting elephant rides and things like that. So isn't that part of the goals about, we get to vote with our dollar with what works?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's also like Joelle touched on a little earlier. It's about, providing, being able to do something without taking away from something, Like if you're on a ride a dirt bike or a four-wheeler through the woods doing this whatever at this tourist location, is that more beneficial to the town and the community or is it more harmful to the environment? Trying to weigh those things. So now you find all these different these companies that are changing the way they're doing things. Maybe they're making electric bikes or they're no longer doing the four-wheel stuff, but they're doing some kind of new hiking things, and they because Sure, if they're making money, that's fine. Like, but if you're destroying, the wildlife and ecosystem at the same time, then like that's not sustainable. And like she said before, the goal is to be able to have the next generation enjoy what's there that you're enjoying now. So, like, the same culture integrity is there, the community is there, biodiversity is there, not on top of that, but it's you know, did you make it better? Are the people there better? Because it's like if you're there and they're just getting by and you're sustaining, that's fine. That's good. But if that inequality isn't, the gap isn't shrinking, then it's like how much good are you doing? It's like first part is to
Yeah.
maintain it, which is good. If we can get to that point, which a lot of things are, but then let's go that extra step to bring back these wildlives, bring back these communities, bring back the equality of financial and just living conditions in some of these places that still aren't there.
You bring that up. It ties into the other SDG, the goal number 15, life on land, because protecting biodiversity, and I'm going to say this, Africa learned that very quickly. Their biggest, obviously they have a lot of commodities, and as the entire continent, colonialism struck, from all kinds of people took aim to take everything out of the continent, which is the motherland. Sorry, I can say that. I lived there. It is. Taking care of the land when they realized, and you'll see now how, women are even part of this. So going back into the inequality and women running things, there's armies of women protecting wildlife. And they knew that Kenya knew, like, wildlife is our business. Protecting wildlife is our business. You can go to Kenya, go to Botswana, all of that, South Africa. You want to be able to see the wildlife. That is one of their biggest commodities, except for wine as well, and out of the Cape, all kinds of things. But
Yes.
I'll go on and on about Africa, so I'm going to try and keep it short. But, they realized that wildlife is key. Keeping our biodiversity is key. Nancy and I were very, very lucky to be there at, probably the very biodiverse in the late 70s and early 80s. And at the time, it was also going through, rampant poaching, and that's our background, especially Nancy's, and saw the change. But at the same time, it was still, as people were getting on board to save animals, there was still like mass destruction and death of human beings over it. Let's not fool ourselves. When we talk about sustainability, that also means human lives, human lives, wildlife, people that traffic humans, traffic drugs, traffic ammunition, they traffic wildlife. They're the same individual that will do that. They don't care what they traffic. They want to bring the money in. And so, we lived through that kind of stuff in Africa, seeing what was going on. Honestly, once they realized biodiversity was key, that meant sustainability for the people, sustainability for their villages. That brought in the water. So protecting nature is a really good part of that. And I love that as travelers, we can be part of that. We could choose to go to do you want to go to a safari park that is someone had animals shipped in, or would you rather support a park that is actually trying to keep the animals in the wild? That kind of thing. So I think that's a big discussion. And I think we can volunteer. We can volunteer too, right?
We can. And I think we need to acknowledge those countries that are actually have inspiring examples, such as Costa Rica. They are a world leader in ecotourism, running mostly like on renewable energy, protecting rainforests, and then reinvesting the park fees they get into the biodiversity program instead of just, lining their pockets. My sister and I had visited there a couple of years ago, and it was fascinating. It's like to the point their protection of wildlife, you're not allowed to talk to the animals. You can't even say hi to the animals. And they get on your back right away, because this idea of not interfering with the natural wildlife in the system, there's a lot of countries working. Iceland is another one. Easter Island is another one, who are truly working hard at ecotourism as well as just responsible tourism to preserve these areas that are highly sensitive, that we don't want damaged, because we can't once it's damaged, it's gone. And we need to allow this to continue, because there's research still being done. The moai that are still being found in Rapa Nui and Easter Island. So many of these at Iceland too, the constant changing of the environment there. We need to have an active role, and we do have a role. We do have a role as tourists or visitors, whatever we want to call ourselves, travelers. When we go in there, we need to that's one interesting thing that Ryan learned in his research, which I was interested in, he was sharing with me, was that there's one of the biggest efforts we can do for sustainable tourism is educating people before they come. Hey, listen, this is, how it goes, especially educating people about culture, tradition, and so forth. But what one study he had actually shared with me was the study in relation what was happening from an educational perspective. But once they got there, even though, oh yeah, we'll do that. Yep, that's great. Once they got there, they didn't do that. They
Yeah, just
changed their
the
behaviors.
behavioral gap, yeah, where they say one thing and then they go and they don't do what they say. They don't practice what they preach, and
Mm,
trying to figure out why that's such a thing. Maybe it's just because people want to boast and say like, look how good I am. Yeah, I'm learning this. I'm going to do this, and they get there and they're like, whatever. It's easier just to open another bottle of water or to do whatever, throw the towel on the floor and not recycle, whatever. It's trying to figure out like the root problem of like why people can't act the way they speak when it comes to fixing the problems. I mean, maybe they learn too much from some of these our governments people. It's like they say this, they say this, they say this, and then that's the role model. They say one thing and then they do another. I think that's like maybe a societal thing, but I don't know. I think it's just trying to figure out why we can't hold to our word and just do um do the right thing. The one saying that what a leader of mine said a long time ago is like every day you have to choose individual. You have to choose from the hard right or the easy wrong. It seems so kind of trivial and small to be like, oh well, it's just throwing a piece of trash around or it was whatever, but it's not, because it all adds up. Small things add up, and
mm.
there's also some of the biggest problems are caused by little things, and those big problems can also be solved by such a simple fix. Like, for instance, like the Great Depression and like the Dust Bowl, right, and like the drought and everything. That was not using water responsible. It was farming. It was like, well, I think they call it like contour farming. They basically just went with the land, so all the water would just run off, and then there was a drought, and then all the crops died. Then we had a Dust Bowl, and then look where our country was. It was like in ruins for such a long time. And the simple fix was that to not farm like that, which everyone kind of knew, but I think it was like kind of a being lazy thing. And then now we farm a certain way now, and everything's works. So it's huge things can happen because of small actions, and
Ah,
also big improvements can be made by the smallest of action. If especially if everyone's doing their part, it can make waves.
I agree. I want to say this. People hate change.
Yeah.
They hate getting out of their comfort zone. They also are scared of being, when they hear ecotourism and things like that, they think they're going to be on a raft in the middle of, a swamp with no mosquito netting. It's kind of that picture that goes to them. So no, change, comfort, like to get out of your comfort zone, to really learn, to truly live is to get out of your comfort zone. And the quickest way to do that is to travel. Then you start to learn about, do I really need all this stuff? Because it starts at TSA. How much do you have in your bag? How much do you need? Really? I mean, I can tell you, Nancy and I travel the country in a RAV4. That's how much we
Wow.
need. Think about it. We have a storage unit that's 9x5. We simplified our life. It's not simple because we have a lot of work, but this is the thing. And then going back to the other part, Ryan, it's integrity. It's when your words and your actions align, whether it's big or small. And the integrity is what sustainability is. It's about keeping the integrity of a historic site, historic monument, someplace like Machu Picchu, someplace like the Presidio in San Francisco, keeping that and then nurturing it and adding into it and going, how can we keep this sustainable? So yes, profitability has to be part of it. Business has to be part of it. But if the business is taking down what brings the business, that's biting the hand that feeds you. So the world has been biting its own hand off, quite frankly. And so as travel, okay, we don't want to get out of our comfort zone. Well, then there's a couch, there's 6 packs of really bad beer and a television that's going to yell at you all day, and you'll never get it. And that's where you're going to stay. And that's the picture you've created, maybe. I'm talking about people that don't want to. But you look at, oh, I'll never get there. I'll never get there. Well, the first step is out of the door. The first step could be going to your local park. The first step may be going to a movie with friends. Start anything that you do to get out of the exact place that you're in is getting out of your comfort zone. So I think this is such a cool conversation on this because it also goes into the last goal, which is, well, it's not the last goal, it's the SDG 17, which is partnership for goals. And so to make it on things, sometimes doesn't that also include maybe partnering with people that you never thought you would? And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And that's important to have that conversation with those people. Again, back to bringing all the voices to the table. Because, oh, we don't need them. They're not, maybe they're the people in town that, well, they're just the laborers or something. But they all need to be at the table. We need to partner and partner with governments. I mean, governments, we have these communities overwhelmed. Well, people need to partner with those governments because that government can cap visitor numbers, especially in fragile areas. They can reinvent tourism, taxes into conservation, and then reward eco-center certified operators. So the government has a role here, and we need to include them in this. And this idea, well, we should only do it locally. Without the government on board, you're sort of going to not have as much success as you should. So their education has to go, obviously, for tourists, for businesses, as well as the government. All these people need to be engaged at the table. As Ryan said, the stakeholders. We need to engage all stakeholders, because when we don't, we actually lose a lot in the process and then damage is done. That is incredibly important.
It's not authentic then. An example of that is we were doing a media trip at a very, very beautiful destination, very historic, one of our favorites. Like, if we ever settle down, we may move there. And we were there for this huge celebration, and they had a horse and carriage, and the guy running the horse and carriage, and I'm iffy on that, because it's like, how are you treating the horse? Smoking a cigarette in front of the horse's face and blew smoke into the horse's face. I go back into the tourism people we're working with, and I said, I will not photograph this. I did photograph that. And she just said, please do me a favor. I want you to email the photo and email a letter of complaint as a visitor here to our city manager. We, as the tourism people, are tired of hearing about this, and we all care about the horse. This is a bad image for our city. This is a bad thing for the horse. And that's something we can do as travelers. You see abuse of animals. You see abuse of people, quite frankly. We need to be nice to those. We can do that. And the locals can do that. Going to your local government, that's where you have more pull beyond. That's your biggest pull. You can be on their front door every single day. And we should.
Yep. I mean, giving those voices again, and we can, and they do listen, especially, again, we talked about tourism, especially in some parts of the world, is sometimes their lead economy. It is what the economic driver for that community is. Giving voices. And I think one of the things that we didn't talk about daily, but and that there's a little bit in the SDGs as well, is cultural authenticity, because you see more and more that, we put these shows on that it waters down what the true culture is. And they started altering their culture to entertain the tourists versus actually being genuine. And in the process, things that are meaningful, their history becomes washed down as well. And so it comes to us when we're there as travelers to be sensitive to that, to look for things that are actually not just about us. It's about something that actually tells their story. And again, back to being a good guest, but being authentic, seeking authentic experience, buying artifacts or artisan products from the locals versus the tourist store that looks like most of the stuff came from another country. I mean, really paying attention to those things so we can drive that economy, help those small businesses, help those artisans whose whole life depends on what you buy that day. But I think keeping in mind that we need to, as a voice, all seek that as visitors. And you can look at reviews, and you can look at some history, you can look at critics, and then also find out, what, that one's actually not truly representing what, the culture there. Let me go find something. Easter Island is a place that, you have to look into that because there's different cultural shows, but it's some known to be more authentic and true versus entertaining. And so we really need to find that balance. And we as visitors need to actually take some responsibility for that.
And be patient, because a lot of people are trying to do things that are authentic, and it's huge for them to do it. To make those changes. Have some patience. You're traveling. Travel is not fast food. and neither is the experience,
Yep.
And I wanted to touch on just on the cultural side of things. And when we travel, we go into someone else's house, literally, and so they may have different beliefs from us spiritually, religiously, just even how they raise kids. But, kids are kids. But there's things we need to abide by and kind of sometimes just put our opinions in the backpack and
Absolutely.
open up to the new experience. So like when you went to Turkey, right? Didn't you have to, not wear shoes and,
Yeah.
have some respect in that way?
Absolutely. It's all about, we need to be sensitive. And every time we go someplace, we look to see, okay, what's the dress? What's the thing? We're there, part of their culture. I'm always shocked, especially in Turkey, in most areas, you needed to be more sensitive. Morocco was the case too. And there was those people who dressed like they were at the beach. And you're going, how is it? It's so disrespectful to them. And it also doesn't make us look good at visitors. Like, luckily, most aren't that way, and they realize those are those unique people. But it's amazing how that one person will stand out, which is part of their goal, to get attention. But we must really be sensitive to their culture, their traditions, their daily life, respectful. I think if you just use the word respectful, which to us means learning local greetings, dressing appropriately. If like in Morocco, Moroccans do not like their photos taken. So if you're going to take a photo, you want to sort of ask permission. You don't have to literally go up and have sign something. You could show them the camera and say, you shake head, yes, no. And some would say no. And other ones would shake their head, yes. And that is your, permission. And then also, as we've said before, supporting local artisan and family businesses versus going to the Hard Rock Cafe. Go to that little mom and pop shop, because you will definitely have a much richer experience in the process. So we really need to, that's our biggest concern, I think, when we go out there, is we want authentic experiences to truly get to know the people, the culture, their food, their traditions. And we don't see that. We see it. We see so many travelers or tourists who don't seek that. And we find that sort of sad, because that's what makes us love travel so much. It's the people we meet along the way and the cultures we get to know and the traditions. And Turkey was a perfect example of that as well.
I think that it should be taught in schools. You're a father, and shouldn't we have a travel course in school? No?
I actually, after doing that paper and everything else, doing the UN thing, I actually was thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? Like, that should be like a course in high school, like early on, start, to learn, like, when you learn about cultural different things, like, hey, this is how you learn how to travel. This is like how to be responsible tourists. Like, have like, there'd be like a class one semester or something, that like, it just broadens your knowledge of like, hey, like, if you want to get out in the world, this is how you do it. Do it responsibly. Like, don't destroy the environment, respect the culture, do this, how to be safe when traveling, and whatever. I really was thinking about that for a while, actually. It was like, man, like, I guarantee you could make a good class, like just a one semester, a class and somewhere in high school that just goes over all these cultural kind of things and awareness, and like how different parts of the world do things and whatever. So it gets them thinking, maybe it gets people thinking of how they act, or maybe it gets some of the people that want to travel and to inspire them to be like, oh, maybe I do want to travel now. Maybe it's going to be a little easier. And now I know it's not going to be so bad when I go, because I know, I kind of know what to look for, to think about when I'm doing it.
Well, one thing I think we could do in this country is, even if you can't travel overseas, right? Go to local festivals, go to local restaurants owned by, that are global, right? Go to the Asian restaurant, like if it's a Chinese restaurant, go to a Chinese restaurant that's run by a Chinese family. Go to a Greek festival. I mean, you're going to learn about the Greek, culture there at a Greek festival. Go to a Renaissance festival. I think these events bring out the culture. They're celebrating their culture. And, America is made up of multiple cultures. And, so I think we can start at home.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's an excellent. My friend just actually, I didn't even know they had this myself. She just attended a Croatian festival in Seattle.
Really?
It took up the whole Seattle center, and it was just Croatian. And she absolutely said it was fantastic. And she had a sausage there she loved so much that we stopped by. We were in Central Washington over the weekend. We had to stop there because she heard it's the best sausage ever, and she loved it. And when we got there, it was 11 o'clock in the morning, and they'd already sold out of the sausage she wanted. So yeah, those cultural festivals. Again, I didn't know Croatia had them, and it's seek them out. because there are a lot. And I sort of after that thought, oh, what else has one? And there's a lot. And so even the Renaissance festivals can be a way to sort of expose yourself to a culture from way back when. And again, looking at life from a different perspective from our day-to-day living. So I totally agree. We could start at home, and I think that whole idea of teaching that in school and engaging them in that. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why language is important to teach in high school and even middle school is because they are now learning a different culture. They're becoming aware that, you know what, there's other languages. There's other people beside what I see in my small world. And initially, I think we don't explain to young people enough why that's important, because all of us go, oh, why do we have to take that language class? I'm never going to go there. But maybe you will after you learn the culture and the food and the stuff like that.
The food is a way in too.
Yes.
And the arts, music gets everybody, whether or not you know what the song is about. Music is going to get in your soul, and you may be dancing a new dance you don't know, and put yourself out there. I mean, Oktoberfests are even like that. Come on now. There's just so much we can do. And over the holiday season, it's fun to celebrate everyone's cultures. I mean, come on now. I don't mind having, celebrating Kwanzaa. I don't mind, having Hanukkah, because that means I get a little gift every day. Maybe it's a piece of chocolate. I want a little gift every day, so, and I want Christmas. I want New Year's too. So I'm just saying, let's celebrate everybody. I mean, that's the best thing to do. Once we get into that celebratory kind of thing, it's like, oh, this culture does that. Well, I'm going to try and bake that cookie, and so it goes from there. And then that is a way of traveling that you can do immediately. I mean, we're getting into the holiday season, and, maybe have those conversations at the Thanksgiving table instead of politics. Let's talk about, hey, where have you traveled? Is there any, look at what we can do to connect globally, because as we look at sustainability, it is a global effort, and it starts right there at the Thanksgiving table of what we can connect on. Before we this, because it's been, I feel like we need to do this as a whole series, and
talk about.
There is a lot. And so I think Big Blend Radio will host something and have you guys on it and do a series on this, on the actual goals, on the SDGs. I don't like saying SDG because it makes me feel like I'm saying something else that's dirty. I don't want to say. I just like to talk about, I want to do those goals, but I think it would be really great to do a show series, and I'll commit to that. To
That's
making
awesome.
that happen
Yes, that
from
would be...
our side, and have you guys on it and help host it, and we'll do it and get everyone involved from Big Blend Radio's Club and everybody that we know to get involved, so we can all start looking at examples of what is being done, so that we can all look at the can-dos, because I think this is just such a big conversation. So you just got me in trouble. So thank you so much. In closing, I would like to go to that example, because I think that is the crucial thing. We've talked about a lot of the things that are negative, but who is doing a good job? And I'm going to give an example at the end, because I've got a good example. I use it all the time. So some listeners on Big Blend Radio are going to go, oh gosh, you're talking about him again. But it's such a perfect example. But from each of you, a great example from your travels around the world, across the country, of a place that is doing a good job in sustainability, of keeping their culture, their integrity in history, in nature, and in their way. Because once you go to someone else's place, once they start saying, here's my house rules, they're now educating the traveler as well. So let's start with you, Ryan. Who's a good example?
Well, a big one is always Iceland, but not, their model of just how they live their country in general is just really good and sustainable. But they have all those natural resources there. They have, even, for an island, they have all that clean water, but then they have the volcanic activity, so they heat and sidewalks with them and houses with them, and they have a way to filter water through all the rocks and stuff. So it's a really sustainable kind of way of life there, but they try to keep that with what they do activity wise and like tourism. But then they also, like, now they're bringing their, it's one of those things where things get lost, they said, and inequality and stuff like that. They're one of those countries that's trying to bring back their native language, and it's same with a lot of other areas like the Nordic countries and Ireland and other places, bringing their their languages back. But that's a definitely one that I can think of right off the top of my head because it's just, you know, the way they are all about saving resources and energy and being responsible and clean, super clean there, like no trash, no, so, you know.
I love that. And apparently a friend of mine who was a world traveler, he said that they have the best burger. The best burger he's ever had in the world was in Iceland. And
Their food there is amazing. We love the food in Iceland. I've been there 4 times, and one of my favorite things to do there, on top of the incredible beauty, is eating. They have incredible food there, and the freshest seafood you'll ever eat.
wow. What's your place?
So Slovenia is a very interesting one. It's a small country, but it has a global model for sustainability. They call it the Green Scheme of Slovenian Tourism. It certifies destinations, hotels, attractions for meeting environmental and cultural standards. So not just environmental. Towns like Ljubljana and Lake Bled are considered green destinations because they use local food systems, public transit, waste reduction programs. What's interesting, what they do is travelers can actually plan their entire itinerary within this certified network, ensuring their visit actually benefits the community and the environment. That is a really fascinating model of Slovenia, and it was an incredible country to visit. So if more countries could adopt something like that, that would be amazing. And it's a stunning country. And as many tourists are beginning to see, there's still natural beauty that just takes your breath away. So that is a very unique model. And I really hope more countries adopt that kind of standard.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about a town in Southwest Arizona, Yuma. Yuma is the capital of the winter lettuce capital of the world. In other words, they are the sunniest place on the Guinness Book of Records. They're between San Diego and Tucson, or San Diego and Phoenix. Yuma is very historic. They're also, you were talking about the Presidio a few months ago. This is where Juan Bautista de Anza, on his expedition, on the Juan Bautista, expedition back in 1776, crossed over the Colorado River to get to the Presidio. And this was how the Presidio was founded, actually. And he had 200 people on foot, and also Father Font traveled with him. And I mean, this is when our country was becoming the country. We're looking at, America 250 next year. Anyway, so they crossed over there, and it's called the Yuma Crossing. And this is where the narrows are of the Colorado River as it flows into Mexico. The headwater of the Colorado River is in Rocky Mountain National Park, which we've been to the headwaters. We have pretty much traveled that route that you can do. We haven't, been on whitewater rafting of it as of yet. But the Colorado River is like the Nile of America. Of this country, I should say. And it has gone through hell. It is lower than you can imagine. We've done so many shows on it, experts on it. They've done things to help it, but it feeds water to LA, to Las Vegas. And then in Yuma, Arizona is where all the crops and the agriculture happens. Citrus, all the winter greens are grown there. Even dates, medjool dates, the best medjool dates, and they take the least water. They grow there naturally without pests. It's amazing. But anyway, this lower part of the Colorado River became very polluted, and invasive species, birds left. The lower part of the Colorado River, there's the ocean to ocean highway bridge. It's very historic, very close to the downtown. And at that point, a lot of homeless people set up camp along the river. It's a warm, hot place in the summer, and they started to clean it up. 49 agencies got together, including 2 Native American tribes, got together, people who, typically said, if we don't save this part of the river, we will not save our town. And they got together, they cleaned up. One side of it is Native American, one part isn't. It's like really amazing. They got together and they cleaned it up and they restored. They're still working on it. This is a huge project. It's become the Yuma Crossing National Heritage Area. Nancy and I have canoed it, and you can canoe and tell the difference of where the restoration is by what we call the wall of birds. When you're canoeing from the Gila River, crosses into it, and the Gila River at that point is pretty dried up, and that's a river that needs help. When you start canoeing, you can just tell the difference of what's poisoned. And then when you hit that beautiful area, egrets and all these birds come out, herons, bobcat has returned. They've made This is within a city. It's incredible. The trash is gone. They put the trees back, the cottonwoods. They figured out how to do that because it's really hard. The palo verdes are there. Bobcat have come back. Beaver have come back. Certain birds have come back that were almost gone. They have their own rail bird that is there. They get over 400 bird species a year here. And they have areas, they've got the east and the west Yuma wetlands, and it's all part of this crossing area that also where ships used to go. I mean, this is, the train history is incredible there. I mean, what happened, there's a fort. I mean, there's just so much history that it's mind-blowing. It is one of the most crucial places of the Southwest when you think about history. The territorial prison overlooks this part of the river. And you had people like Pearl Hart, who was a gunslinging little woman who got her way with all kinds of people and all kinds of reasons, and that's a whole other story. But this riverway is now clean. Families go there and have picnics. People go fishing. People go canoeing. They do river floats down there. There's hiking. There's cycling. People walk their dogs. This has now become a riverfront with hotels and the downtown within walking distance. It's a place where people have festivals. There's even a mini train going around. Commerce came back to a place that was almost dead. Not only was it that dead, it was also a landfill that was on the one side of it that they turned into a solar garden, a butterfly and hummingbird garden, and even a raptor garden. They have a burrowing owl section. I mean, is that not pretty darn cool?
Darn cool.
So that is one little town in Southwest Arizona as an example that we can do in our own country. You know, sometimes we have to start on the city level to get to the country level, like you guys are talking about. Those are a little smaller countries, though, too. Right. So I think this is so important. We can do that. We can get agencies together. It takes tenacity, consistency, and never giving up and finding your partners, like you guys were both saying. So let's continue this conversation for sure. Thank you both so much for what you do in educating travelers and non-travelers to even get on the road or get on that plane for what you do. So wandererscompass.com is the website. Thank you both. We can't wait for next month. Yep. We're going to go, where are we going again?
We're going to go to the eastern shore of Maryland.
Ryan, you're going to get your bird photography lens out?
I'll do what I can.
All right. I want to see those herons and an osprey. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Next time, we're going to find out what Joelle is up to with the UN because it's not over yet, right, Joelle?
No, it's not.
Stay tuned for that. We're going to continue that, like I said. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us here on Big Blend Radio's Wanderer's Compass Travel Podcast. New episodes air every second Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow the show at bigblendradio.com and keep up with Joelle and Ryan's adventures at wandererscompass.com.